of the Sonoma City Council on Monday, April 2020. This is a virtual meeting, and we appreciate everybody's patience as we navigate this new normal, as everyone is. There have been some situations where meetings have been hacked or what is being called Zoom bomb. Staff has taken all possible efforts to ensure that this does not happen. However, in the event that it should, the city clerk will stop the video stream and TV broadcast immediately. The city council will remain in the meeting. However, the meeting will be paused, so no discussion will be happening. If the meeting is able to continue, the stream and broadcast will be reinitiated. If it is not able to reinitiate, the meeting will end, and all matters that have not been considered will be postponed to a later date. Each member of the city council and staff members will be participating in the meeting from their home or office. They all have families, pets, or roommates. In order to be respectful of their private space, council members may turn off their video, but if they are still listening and participating. If a council member leaves the meeting, they will let the mayor or city clerk know, and that will be noted. Public comment will be handled as followed. Public comment can only be accepted via email to publiccomment@sonomacity.org. Public comment can be submitted at any time. However, in order to be read into the record during the meeting, it must be submitted after the mayor calls the meeting to order. So the meeting has been called to order, and you can submit it anytime from now until the end, or until the item comes up. And prior to the close of public comment period for the pertinent item. It will be read into the record with a maximum allowance of 2 minutes per individual comment, subject to the mayor's discretion. Please include the item number that is being referenced in the subject line. Only one email per item can be submitted by each member of the public. Great. With that, I'm going to share the screen. We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh no.
Oh, no.
Sorry. Just 1 second. There we go.
All right. I guess I'll leave. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sounded beautiful. Nicely done. All right, great. Rebecca, would you like to do the roll call?
Sure. Councilmember Agrimonti.
Here.
Councilmember Cook.
Here.
Vice Mayor Hundley.
Here.
Councilmember Harrington.
Present.
Mayor Harvey.
Here.
Thank you.
Great. Can we get a move to, can we get a report on closed session? There was no closed session, so there's nothing to report. And then do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Great. And now we'll leave it open. I guess I'll go ahead and open public comment.
Would you like a roll call vote on that?
Oh, roll
Mayor
call
Harvey?
vote. Sure, I would like that.
Very
much. So.
Councilmember Agrimonti.
Aye.
Councilmember Cook.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hundley.
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington.
Aye.
Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Excellent. And now I'd like to go ahead and open for general public comment. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. It is recommended that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. We're doing 2 minutes of maximum reading time. Under state law, unless otherwise permitted under the Ralph M. Brown Act, the merits of the matter presented under this item cannot be discussed or acted upon by the City Council at this time. For items appearing on the agenda, please wait until the item. The public will be invited to make a comment at the time the item comes up for the council consideration. And so we're going to have the time for you to submit public comments open for 3 minutes. And so that time starts now.
We don't have any currently, Mayor Harvey, so we'll
wait, right, for 3 minutes.
Yeah.
All right. How much time is left? Are we past the 3-minute mark? No, you're muted.
35 seconds.
Okay, good.
The longest 3 minutes ever.
Yes. This is such an interesting new world.
All right. If LaTanya hasn't received anything, we're good to go, Mayor Harvey.
Ready to go. Awesome. Great. I know Councilmember Agrimonti, you had some meeting dedications.
Yes, I do. First to Carlos John Castorena. He was, let's see, married to his high school sweetheart, Alice, for 42 years. He's, as a business owner, Carlos had a drywall business here. He's lived here all his life, served 2 years as president of the Sonoma Valley Field of Dreams. Passionate about sharing. He was part of American Coaches Association, Boys and Girls Club of America, Sonoma Big League, and Valley of the Moon Little League. He leaves behind Alice Castorena, his wife, sister Yolanda Castorena, younger brother Henry Castorena, Charles Castorena, and Jason, his son-in-law Ryan Barfield, daughter Michelle Castorena. He passed away on March 30th. I also have Jessica Leah Rice, daughter of Bob Rice, who used to own the Breakaway Cafe. In the loving arms of her father, Jessica Rice passed away on Tuesday morning after suffering a stroke the day before. For 25 years, she worked at the Breakaway Cafe, her family's restaurant. She leaves behind her son, Jordan, who was her heart and soul, her father, Bob Rice, his partner, Paul Brewer, her brother, Scott Rice, her sister-in-law, Megan Rice. She passed away March 31st. Thank you, Mayor Logan. Harvey.
It works. Thank you so much, Madeline. I appreciate it. Great. We'll move on to consent calendar. All items on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the council, public, or staff request that specific items be removed for separate action. At this time, the council may decide to change the order of the agenda. Do you have any desire to pull anything off the consent calendar? No. I got to bring it up for public comment on the consent calendar. No? Yes? Okay. Open public comment. 3-minute awkward waiting period.
We'll have to think of something to fill this time.
We need the Jeopardy music. I think that would be solid.
Oh, there's Amy's dog. We could look at her dog.
There you go. There's a dog.
I was going to make it the corgi 3 minutes. Woo. There you go. Everybody likes dogs.
Why is this still? I have to, okay, sorry. I'm trying to get this phone to stop ringing. Sorry.
You can go grab it. You got 3 minutes right now.
I don't know. I've grabbed everything. I don't know what else to grab. Maybe maybe I have to go find who's calling me.
Is it your fax machine, Madeline?
Oh. I don't even think anybody faxes anymore, do they? I'm still plugged in. Oh God, you guys. Sorry.
Kind of windy.
I think it's just lawyers and doctors. Fact.
A minute and a half.
Jeez.
One minute.
All right.
Fun.
Wife's birthday in 2 days. Nobody said happy birthday to Lily. Her birthday's during coronavirus, and my birthday was during the power shut off. So we've been really killing
That's
it.
so romantic.
Her birthday's like.
I feel like Facebook memories are good for that. You're like, oh, a year ago I was in a fire, and a year before that I was in a power shut off, and a year before that it's like, it's been different.
Is that a pencil drawing behind you, Madeline?
What?
Is that drawing behind you in pencil?
Oh,
It's like
no.
colored pencil.
Oh, no. You know what it is? It's a scarf. I think I said this
Oh.
a couple of meetings ago. I won it for $10 and it cost $250 to have it framed. Doesn't that make sense?
It's a great background.
We're good to go, Mayor Harvey.
I'm looking at Madeline's scarf. Okay, good. So do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So move.
Second.
Ooh, roll call vote.
Councilmember Agrimonti.
Aye.
Councilmember Cook.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hundley.
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington.
Aye.
Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
All right, on to the regular calendar. Discussion, consideration, and possible restriping of Broadway restriping survey results and possible direction to staff regarding potential request to Caltrans for consideration in Caltrans 2020 to 2021 paving and restriping project. I'll turn it over to Colleen Ferguson, our Public Works Director. Who's
Mr. Mayor, I have to leave. I have to leave for a moment. I have to plug in the iPad.
Let's pause for Madeline to get her iPad plugged in. You go ahead and start sharing your screen though if you want to, Colleen, if you got a presentation for everybody.
Okay, can we get the presentation where people can see it?
Well, let's not talk until Madeline gets
Is it up?
It's coming.
Not-
Hang on.
here. It comes.
Okay. Okay, excellent.
Let's wait for Madeline to come back.
Okay,
Thanks, hon. Okay, I'm back. Oh, I'm back.
All
Okay.
right. Great.
Um,
Go for it.
mixed up. Okay, so good evening, Mayor
Give her a
Harvey.
second. Give her a second. Let her get settled.
Whoop. Oh, she's going for it. I'm not. Okay,
Plug it in. Yeah. Sorry.
that's all right. It's a little tricky navigating all the screens and
Oh, it's everything.
Oh,
All right. You good to go, Madeline?
I am. I'm
All right.
all set up.
All right.
I have two things here, one with the Zoom and one with the council agenda.
Man. All right.
Thank
for it.
you.
Go ahead, Colleen. Sorry about that. Thank you.
oh, that's quite all right. So good evening, Mayor Harvey, members of the City Council. Our online meeting format allowed us to bring together a strong team for discussion of Broadway restriping options and a potential request to Caltrans for Broadway restriping. with their upcoming pavement rehabilitation project. So now I'll formally introduce the team we have here tonight. From Caltrans, we have Betsy Joseph from the Office of Project Management. Betsy is our regional project manager for Sonoma County. Betsy, can you say hi?
Hi.
Hey, Betsy, thanks for being with us.
Great. And then we also have Muthana Amran, also from the Office of Project Management. Muthana is a project manager for projects in Sonoma County. He joined us in Sonoma for our business, staff, and farmers market day of outreach in June of 2019. So Muthana, can you say hi?
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here.
Excellent.
Thanks for being here, Mufana.
Thank you.
And then, of course, we also have Frank Penry, a senior traffic project manager with GHD. And Frank led the consultant team who gathered public input in person last June, developed restriping options, conducted the online Broadway restriping survey, and analyzed the survey results. On to the next slide. Before we begin the presentation, I need to correct some language in the agenda item summary. In the third paragraph of the summary, as shown on the slide, it had said, so the correction says 97% of the survey respondents use a vehicle to move along Broadway, which is true. And you'll see in the reports in the presentation, many of those drivers also walk and cycle along Broadway. So we had drafted some stuff in the AIS and then finalized the report and summary, and I neglected to go back and change the language in the AIS. So I'm correcting that now. And then the other item was in the following sentence.
Hi.
35% of respondents would be encouraged to walk or bike along Broadway with either the buffered bike lane or parking protected bikeway options. The 43% in the original agenda item summary was the percentage of respondents who said that and also identified themselves as cyclists. So a little adjustment in the number that I neglected to make there. So I wanted to get that change out to you. Do you have any questions on that correction before we move into the presentation? No? Okay. On to the next slide. All right, so just an outline of the presentation. So I'll provide some background information, describe the Caltrans paving project, review the public outreach we conducted, and Betsy Muthana will be available for any specific questions about the Caltrans paving project. And then Frank Penry will describe the online survey and summarize the survey results. And I'll review the option to submit a request to Caltrans and the 3 restriping options being considered. And just by way of background, we all understand that Broadway is Sonoma's main street, as well as a view corridor to City Hall and the lovely Sonoma Plaza. And we know people travel Broadway in vehicles, on foot, on bicycles, and as we know from the survey, other wheeled human transport, scooters and skateboards and things, and on buses. We've recognized that Broadway can be a challenging transportation corridor for bicyclists and pedestrians, and that south of the plaza, the Broadway streetscape and striping could be enhanced to improve the pedestrian and bicyclist experience and increase public safety for pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorists. Now this fall, Caltrans will start construction of a project to rehabilitate pavement on Highway 12 through Sonoma. And with this paving project, the city has a rare opportunity to request that Caltrans restripe Broadway to enhance pedestrian bicycle facilities as part of their project. All right. Then we all know Broadway is a main street and important view corridor to the plaza and City Hall, and it's also a state highway. So that's important to keep in mind throughout all of this. It's managed and maintained by Caltrans, and like other streets in Sonoma, the city doesn't get to decide what happens on Broadway and how it should be striped, but we can make a request to Caltrans. I appreciated that the Sonoma Index Tribune ran an article by Bill Lynch in their March 16th edition, and it talked about how in 1956, State Route 12 was restriped by Caltrans. And before that, it had had one lane each direction, one travel lane each direction, and diagonal parking on both sides. And in 1955, Caltrans concluded that the diagonal parking was unsafe based on accident records at the time. And over the objections of the city, Caltrans restriped Broadway to have 2 lanes in each direction, a center turn lane, and parallel parking on both sides. This restriping was done specifically to eliminate the diagonal parking on Broadway, not because of traffic volumes on Broadway. And for over 60 years, Broadway has retained this 2 lanes in each direction configuration. It's interesting history. And the next, okay. As far as city planning documents, you know, we have a general plan. The general plan is a community vision that is then translated into policies, programs, and regulations. A required element of the general plan is circulation. The purpose of the circulation element is to coordinate development of the city's circulation system with existing and planned uses. The circulation element has a focus on pedestrian, bicycle, and transit improvements, as well as auto use. It has an overarching theme of complete streets. And this term redefines how we use our streets and how we spend our money to improve them. This is accomplished by balancing allocation of space in the roadway right-of-way to provide safe and effective facilities that can be used by all modes and all users. Complete streets are for everyone. They make it easy to walk to the market, take the bus to work, and bike to the park. So some things that the circulation element adopted in 2016 noted, was that the city of Sonoma is a city with a size and scale that is well suited to walking. It also noted that Sonoma's size, scale, climate, and topography make it ideal for bicycling. It acknowledged that in many areas, the city lacks the facilities and amenities to make bicycling a good alternative to the automobile. And so those are broad statements about the city, and then the circulation element does go into specific recommendations for different parts of the city. And for Broadway specifically, it recommended that Broadway from MacArthur Street to West Napa Street be reconfigured to 3 vehicle lanes, in one in each direction, and a center turn lane. It noted that volumes are lower on this segment than to the south, and based on the projected volumes, a single lane in each direction would be expected to function acceptably. A 3-lane configuration would be expected to operate safely and efficiently, would help to regulate vehicle speeds in a pedestrian-oriented area, and would create space for bicycle facilities. So that's the city's planning document, our circulation element of our general plan. Caltrans also has a planning document, the Transportation Concept Report for State Route 12, adopted in 2014. It provides a long-range vision for this highway corridor. And the concept plan notes that State Route 12 is Main Street in Sonoma, and it recommends parking, pedestrian, bicycle, and local traffic given precedence over through traffic, and recommends reducing the number of lanes on Broadway. And just these, we've talked about these planning documents recommending reducing the number of lanes on Broadway. So some people wonder, well, you know, what about all the traffic? Well, the traffic on Broadway, the average annual traffic is 8,000 vehicles per day. The capacity for a 3-lane configuration, so 1 lane each direction, the center turn lane, would be 11,000 vehicles per day at the optimal level of service A. As far as peak hour, 840 vehicles per hour on Broadway versus a lane saturation volume of 1,300 vehicles per hour. And just by comparison, stuff we're accustomed to experiencing ourselves, there are 3-lane reaches on Highway 12 on West Napa Street, carries 11,000 vehicles per day on average, and through Agua Caliente, 14,000 vehicles per day. So that's about the traffic on Broadway. And then the Caltrans project itself, that's really the impetus for this having this discussion tonight instead of another time. Caltrans is planning to rehabilitate the pavement on State Route 12 in and near Sonoma from Vallejo Avenue out near Boys Boulevard to Leveroni Road, Napa Road. We all know this is a much needed project because the pavement definitely needs rehabilitation. It's part of Caltrans, the enormous investment that has been made over many decades to create and manage the state highway system. For the 2018 SHOP project list, Caltrans is planning to invest $8.7 million in rehabilitating the pavement on State Route 12 in and near Sonoma. And the current schedule is to have the project ready to bid in June and start construction in November, and then conclude the construction with paving in spring of 2021. When the Caltrans project begins construction this fall, people will notice that it's not just paving. It has features beyond smooth pavement. So in addition to the pavement, the Caltrans project will include new pavement markings, accessible pedestrian ramps where they don't already exist, minor drainage improvements, updated signs, and high-intensity activated crosswalks on Broadway at Patton Street, France Street, and Millay Street, and also on West Napa Street near Riverside and at 3rd Street West. Now, moving on from the background into the outreach we did associated with the survey. So we had a workshop with City Council on March 2nd, and at that time we outlined the robust public engagement program that we had planned to gain input to assist you all in making the decision tonight whether to request that Caltrans restripe Broadway in a different configuration. So the online public engagement tool launched on Friday, March 6th and ran through Monday, April 6th. We used an online platform called Social Pinpoint that allowed community members to participate when it was easy and convenient for them to do so. In hindsight, this turns out to be particularly important when we were all ordered by the Sonoma County Health Officer to shelter in place due to the coronavirus pandemic. An in-person public meeting to gather input just wouldn't have been possible, as it turned out. So we got the word out about the survey through the city website and Facebook postings that provided a link to the public engagement platform. During the week after the survey launched, we ran advertisements in both the Sonoma Index Tribune and the Sonoma Valley Sun, which also directed people to the online portal. Next, yeah, and City Public Works maintenance workers distributed posters and flyers all along Broadway through the downtown area to local schools and to key locations and businesses in the community. And then I sent email messages to agency partners, some of whom are listed on the slide here, and to everyone who provided an email address during our June 2019 in-person public engagement. Our goal was to get lots of community input and share it so you can make informed decisions tonight. Well, I would say we succeeded. Over 700 people provided input and comments to the online survey. That's a lot of response for a town this Sonoma size. I really want to thank everyone who participated. So anybody watching, you know who you are. Thank you very much for taking your time to participate in the survey. So now I'm turning the presentation over to Traffic Engineer Frank Henry with GHD to present the survey and the results.
Thank you, Colleen. A lot of this slide right here is a bit of a rehash of what has been introduced already.
Thank you.
I am on, right? Okay. But the key points of the have your say on restriping Broadway after paving is the amount of input that we received. 731 respondents responded to the survey, and due to the shelter in place and some extenuating circumstances, what was supposed to close on March 27th, the survey was extended another, I believe that was 2 weeks, and ended on March 6th, on April 6th. That allowed actually an additional 125 respondents to provide input. So this input that we've received is summarized in the slides that I'll have for you. We have a couple control groups that I'll illustrate. And then the important thing to note is that much of what you're seeing tonight is in percentages of the response received. And this particular subgroups, the residents, the users, and the age groups. Next slide, please. So this slide right here is to talk about the demographics of the survey. What we had is an actually overwhelmingly large response from the 61 to 70-year-old respondents. 34% of the respondents were in that age group, which actually was almost as great as the next two smallest groups, the 41 to 50 and the 51 to 60. Those made up about 37%, and you can see that the 61 to 70 is 34%. The breakdown is actually underneath. So you can see that we actually had 246 people, respondents within the 61 to 70, and how that broke out over the various ranges. Happy to see that we did have some 18-year-old and younger respondents taking the survey. The next item there, and so that will be actually one of our control groups, is the age. What best describes you was one of the questions that we received input on, and this was largely to understand what where the group was coming from. So we had a breakdown here of whether they were resident or of Broadway Street or the downtown district, whether they worked at home or in the business within the Broadway or downtown, whether they lived in Sonoma at large or live or worked within the Sonoma Valley. And then the last part there, visiting the city or other. And other would be property owners, caregivers, people who come into town for various reasons, but don't.
Mr. Mayor, I have to leave. I'm relieved for a couple of minutes. My iPad is dead still.
Okay.
You can continue. I've read this unbelievably.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline.
So 97% of the respondents actually live or work in the Sonoma Valley area, including the city of Sonoma. And you can see here at the bottom, the number of respondents broken out by the actual number, leading to our total of 731. On the right-hand side here is the breaking down how often they're using Broadway, traversing the roadway, accessing the businesses and homes. You can see here, actually, I need to minimize. There we go. 88% of the respondents visit Broadway or use Broadway at least once per week, multiple times per week and every day. We're summed together to be the 88%, with a much smaller percentage using it just once a week or every couple weeks, even once a month or less frequently. You can see those breakdowns getting into single digits for once a month, 10 people. What we saw here is we had 72 folks not respond to this question. That's why there's the discrepancy between the 659 and the 731. Not everybody responded to every question, but over the course of the survey, many respondents responded to most of the information. So next slide, please. One of the things the survey did is it not only asked questions where somebody would check a box or make a selection, but we received a number of comments from folks over the course of the survey, and those will be illustrated here. These here have to do with the demographics. Just wanted to highlight some of these where, you know, we had a 60-year-old Sonoma native. We had sixth generation born and raised, now living in Glen Ellen, as well as people who live within the city limits. The person here actually was part of the coalition 30 years ago to try and get marked bike lanes in the city and for students to get to school. People responding saying that they rode their bike almost every day while commuting to Broadway or throughout Sonoma. Next slide, please. So here's where we take those control groups, and I'll illustrate here in a second, but what we wanted to do is find out who's moving and how. And so what we did is we took the question 3 there, how do you move around along Broadway? And we broke those groups. Now this was one of those multiple selection items where people could select whether they drove, walked, biked, rode skateboards, or even scooters along the roadway. And then what we did is we broke them into paired groups so that we could get that that item moved back down to the 731. Oh, back please. There we go. So what we have here is you'll see that the largest portion of respondents drive or walk, drive and walk the Broadway. 29% drive only. Another 26% drive, walk, and cycle. What we get out of this is that we find out that 97% of the respondents drive and do something, 33% cycle and do something else other than drive, and then 63% are walking and doing something else as well. Where this breaks out into is the by location and by age. So you can start to see where those groups have their respective makeup in the larger question. As I indicated initially, our largest groups here are the third vertical column from the left, which is the live in Sonoma, and the next group under age of respondents is the second from the not the far right, but second from the end of the right. They're the 61 to 70-year-olds. And you can see by proportion, that's 100% is the total bar as to what percentage of those larger groups actually are doing any of the items there. For the largest groups of both location and by respondents, large majority of those folks are doing exactly what the graph shows there, which is about 40%, or give or take a little, are driving and walking. Each of those colors represents back to the original pie chart, and that's the theme we're going to follow through on all of these questions. So that's who's moving and where they're moving to. The next question we had, and not particularly in the order of the survey, but it was one of the follow-on questions, was, would you cycle more often along Broadway if there was a bike lane? 40% of the respondents indicated that they would, 42 indicated that they would not, and 18% indicated that the question was not applicable to their particular use of the Broadway. So again, you can see the breakdowns to the right there. There really isn't anything going on here except, yeah, we'll just keep moving. 40, so right here, the Broadway restriping, safety and driving. So this question here was aimed at understanding how safe respondents felt being a particular segment of the movers across the roadway. So question 6 here was, based on your experience, how would you rate your safety of Broadway, rate the safety of Broadway as a vehicle driver? 1 being the not very safe and 5 being very safe. As written here on the slide, the question applied to 99% of the respondents, and as drivers, 80% rated the safety of Broadway as safe. That's receiving a 4 or 5 on the scale of 1 to 5. Again, you can see the breakout across the screen here. The next slide, please. This is where we, back one, yeah, thank you. Question 8 actually asks that same question, but with regard to pedestrians. So how safe is Broadway as a pedestrian? So again, 99% of the respondents we got on this question, and as walkers, 53% rated the Broadway as safe. Again, you're looking across the bar charts there, you can see certain populations. However, those populations may not have as many users in them, and that way they didn't impact the pie chart as much. But if you look at the 51, under 51, and over 50, you can see those are almost identical as far as the uses. So I felt pretty confident that this breakout was adequate there. So question 7, please. Next slide, please. Sorry. Based on your experience, would rate the safety of Broadway as a cyclist. And so right here, we start to find the indication that we have some respondents that are not considering themselves now or into the future cyclists, and therefore we had 23% consider this question not applicable to them. And with 77 of the respondents, we had 25% of those respondents gave Broadway as a cyclist a safe rating, 4 to 5. Again, as we indicated before, nothing too telling about the data here. You can see your largest groups actually fall into that, so there wasn't a lot of discrepancy in between the groups. Next slide, please. So we just talked about the different issues that either drivers, pedestrians, or cyclists would have using Broadway. This question here, what factors contribute to your safety concerns? This kind of starts to get at the root of what is of concern along Broadway for its users. You can see here pedestrian crossings at 36% was a very large concern. You can see that blue for some of the younger aged respondents was higher, and the back one, please. Following the pedestrian crossings at 36%, speed of the traffic was 22%, and cycling on sidewalks was 28%. Proximity of vehicles and bicyclists, this would be accounting for the existing facility, there not being bicycle lanes on the roadway, would account for 12% of those folks citing that as a concern. Next slide, please. So again, looking beyond the numbers, these are some of the comments that we received with regard to the concerns for safety along the roadway. Again, just to highlight a couple and highlight them for a reason that they're likely to be fixed. The bad pavement comes up as a condition or a safety concern, as well as the pedestrian crossings, lack of sufficient crosswalks. Again, we had one here that says cycling is a non-issue, and he's never seen anyone cycling on Broadway. Cyclists don't obey the traffic laws. If lanes are eliminated, will intensify traffic on 2nd Street East or other parallel streets, and those streets already have too much traffic. Inattention, aggressiveness, speeds, all of those things reiterated here in comments are also reflected in the tables themselves. Next slide, please. So we brought up here, we're bringing up the standard bike lane, which was one of the options that we had here. It's important to note that with the standard bike lane only makes room in the existing geometry or the existing roadway with 4 bike lanes by narrowing travel lanes. It doesn't provide a buffer. It's effectively the do nothing alternative while retaining all 5 travel lanes. Adding the bike lanes alone would not be expected to influence the factors related to the safety concerns. Pedestrians would still be crossing and exposed to 5 travel lanes when crossing the street. The lanes and the number of lanes, not a significant reduction in those traffic lanes to impact speeds or some of the other safety concerns that we had that were noted earlier. However, again, this would retain the existing 5 travel lanes on Broadway between MacArthur and Napa Street. Next slide, please. So with regard to the bike lane, this is again looking beyond the numbers. Lots of comments, 730 people responding to these. Every time we had an opportunity to receive comments, comments were likely a third of the respondents replying to these. So we tried to capture, you can see here, if I tried to put them all up, it would be impossible to read them all, but that first one on the left actually is a repeat and belongs on the right as it is there, so I apologize for that. We also got a mix of comments. This is where it got interesting, is that that backhanded compliment to some extent, where to say that what you like about the standard bike lane, we received comments like nothing. They didn't find anything redeeming about the bike lane. And then when we asked them what they disliked about it, we got everything or nothing. So we did receive a lot of comments that were kind of in either column or either camp with regard to liking it or disliking the alternative. But you can see here that largely the reasons people liked the standard bike lanes is it actually kept the 5 travel lanes. It improved visibility. It was a good option. It was an option that still allowed things to stay the same. Things that people didn't like about it was, to some extent, I see a waste of time and space. Car doors. So for those that would be using the bike lanes, there'd be no buffer between the bikes and the cars. Therefore, it would expose those bicyclists to the doors opening along the roadway. Car doors, narrow lanes for cars, so the car lanes would be narrowed in order to accommodate the addition of the bike lane. Again, things like you're fixing a problem that doesn't exist. It keeps things the way they are, which was a dislike of the standard bike lane. So you can see a mix of comments with regard to the like and dislike for the standard. Now, if we move on, what we see here is gauging the cyclist's interest in general. So the survey, we really tried to get, there were the very direct questions where we asked what you like about this or rank this or do that. But then we also wanted to touch back at what type of bicyclists are we talking to? And so this is a question here is, what is your relationship to cycling? And so I hope you all recall we had the little bike pyramid back in March when we talked to you initially about this. And that bike pyramid took those, the very top of it was the strong and the strong rider. I ride on the road, bike lanes are not. Then there was the second tier, which was the confident rider who typically ride on the road but likes to have a bike lane. Then you had that next tier, which was the interested. They'd like to bike ride, typically bike ride away from vehicles, but if there were a protected path or an adequate buffered bike lane, they would use it. And then again, we have those folks that were just not going to get onto a bicycle. And you'll see here that they're broken down largely by quarters. Quarter of the respondents indicated that they met each of those 4 groups. Gets fun when you start to look and try and match those 4 groups to the, who's riding by location, or what their interest relation to biking is by location. by the way that they use the roadway, and there should be no surprises there that, somebody who drives and cycles is obviously going to have a very strong representation, and by age. And so those 18 and under, they're either strong or confident riders, and they're likely, the upper age of that group there. Where we start to see some discrepancy here is that average over 50, under 50, we see a big discrepancy in the confidency of respondents. That would be those two columns all on the far right on the top graph, where the confident riders more so under 50, less confident over 50. Of course, over 50, there was less interest in riding as well. Now, the reason we've got the second graph here takes us to how these four relationships that we've got on the screen map out to the different types of bike lanes that we were talking about, the bicycle facilities. And so the question 21 was, as a cyclist, which of the following would you feel most comfortable using? And you can see that the strong rider matches up very closely, about a quarter, but matches up with a standard bike lane. You've got the confident rider that matches up with a buffered bike lane. You've got a protected bike lane that matches up with those that are interested. And of course, not applicable, again, matches up with not applicable above. These are all within 2%, 3% or so. Really kind of telling that, who's responding and what type of facility we would expect they would go for. Next slide, please. So now this was the part of the survey. We get into questions that were more directed towards the alternatives. This was a question 15 was about the buffered bike lane. And what we did is we asked, how would the buffered bike lane change your use of the roadway? And so 22% of the respondents said it would not change their current use. 3% indicated that they would be encouraged to drive more on Broadway. 23% indicated that they would be encouraged to cycle more on Broadway. And 12% would be encouraged to walk more on Broadway. Again, noting that it changes the walkers. It isn't just a bicycle improvement. By changing the roadway configuration, we changed from 5 lanes of exposure to 3 lanes of exposure for a pedestrian crossing the streets. We did get a 33% responded indicating that they would discourage their use of Broadway. This, in fact, leads back to those comments we had before about kind of a general sense that the change in roadway from 3 to 5 is going to have an impact, despite what the numbers show. Again, 7% indicate that other, and this was largely a further response as to why they would not use Broadway in our review of the data. As you look across by location, by transport, or by age, you can start to see how the green changes. For instance, on transport, those 6 columns there in the middle, those folks that responded to say they drove only had a large influence, or not influence, but at least largely said that they would be discouraged from using Broadway, or would reduce their use of Broadway. However, as we went over towards the folks that would drive and cycle, or drive, walk, cycle, or drive another, or even walk and cycle, you can see that discouragement or reduction in use starting to decrease as you move across the chart. By age, both ends kind of came to the center here. You can see that, and I'm using the 51 and over 50 as kind of a guide, that the under 51 group would be more encouraged to ride than the group over 50. Largely the same Oh, well, actually, it's the green. The green actually had a little bit of a reduction in that group under 51. So
kind of interesting that we did a breakdown for people between the ages of 19 and 20.
So may I ask a question? This is Madeline. So some people are, is that okay to ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay, because it seems to be a connecting theme about walking on Broadway. Walking and crossing the street or just walking? I have never crossed that street walking.
Okay. The question wasn't as specific, but given the responses indicating there was a concern with the crossings of Broadway, we would gather that, you know, just even a driver, if you're driving, parking, walking, it's very likely you could be crossing as well. But we did not make a distinction between a crossing pedestrian and a walking pedestrian.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And Mayor Harvey, you had made a comment about the under 18 versus, you know, that worked out to be a very kind of an odd group to have. You're right. What we did is we were hoping to determine how many school age respondents we would have. That's really where that 18 and under was the impetus of that was to determine how many people, how many respondents were school age. And as we know from the responses, there were only 4 respondents in that group.
Yeah.
And that actually is another portion of the data. We did ask all of the respondents whether they had a school age dependent. And we found overwhelmingly 70% of the respondents did not have a dependent.
The vast majority were over 50, right?
Correct.
Over 50 and over 60. Our largest group was
60 to 1 to 70.
Yeah.
So we asked the question hoping we would get an idea of how many school age children. However, it didn't turn out to be more than 4. Buffered. Yeah, so these, again, looking beyond the numbers, this is comments that we received with regard to the liking or disliking of the buffered bike lane. And we've got some comments there. The 1 lane versus the 2 will slow down the speeds of the cars. This was considered a positive of the buffered bike lane. What did they like? Absolutely nothing. Again, you know, we've highlighting clearly marked facilities, the buffer and the bike lane. It says fewer cars on the road at pedestrian crossings, but I think it was, I would mount that as a positive to being fewer lanes. I like how the cyclers would have a buffer, reduces friction between the cyclists and the parked cars. I would add, as well as, you know, the friction from the moving traffic. On the dislike side, it reduces the number of vehicle lanes. There's no physical separation or protection, which is an item we'll get to here shortly. Still too close to traffic, too much space, ugly green paint. One of the things I want to note back on this is our visual simulations, as well as the cross sections, indicated there would be green lane. In our profession, and the way we do this is we utilize that green paint to really indicate where there's going to be conflicts and where more attention should be paid between the interaction between bicyclists and the vehicle, bicyclists and the pedestrian. So we're not looking at lining the streets from one end to the other in green paint. So again,
like who noted that it's going to keep pedestrians safer when they're entering and exiting their car, because it can be a little nerve-wracking on Broadway getting back into your car. I like that.
Yeah, this would considerably have a larger buffer between the travel lane and the parked car. Highlighting a couple other, it's, you know, what do you dislike? It's almost perfect, but it's not protected from the moving vehicles. bike lanes are not used enough to warrant changing Broadway. Car doors and parkers.
Yeah, but the buffer protects from car doors, the cyclists from the car doors, isn't it?
Yes, that's actually a miss on that response. But yeah, if you go back one slide, please. You can see here, because of the roadway width we have on Broadway, we're actually allowed to not only buffer between the moving traffic and the bike lane, but also provide a substantial buffer between the bike lane and the parked car. This isn't always used. It's really the luxury of having such a large palette to work with here. But this would keep the bicyclist out of the door zone.
Yeah.
Move forward, please. Now to the protected bikeway. Again, interestingly enough, we came up, and I didn't highlight this on the last slide. I was going through each of the uses there, but I'll make the point here that 35% of the respondents would be encouraged to either bike or walk along Broadway with either of these two options. What makes up that 35% is a little different depending on the options. In this case here, 20% would not change their use, as opposed to 22% in the previous alternative. 5% would be encouraged to drive, where 3% was with the buffered. The 22% would be encouraged to cycle on Broadway, 13% would be encouraged to walk on Broadway, and the same number of respondents indicated that they would not, that they would either reduce or discourage their use of Broadway, and same with the other 7%. So that 40% is still sitting out there between both the options. Again, you can, yeah, there we go. That's fine. There really isn't a large discrepancy. It's similar discrepancies, not discrepancies, similar changes between the different groups. Drive only has a very large, would reduce or discourage. As you got over to the more active modes of transportation, less driving dependent, you can see that use or continued use or increased use changing as you go to the right. Between the 51 and the over 50, you can see there again, similarly, the encouraged bicycle use would be a little bit more with the under 50, and the not changing their current use would increase a little bit with the over 50. Some slight changes there in the reduce use and other. We can go to the next slide. Here we have, as we've done before, beyond the numbers, parking protected versus the dislikes, or liking parking protected versus the dislikes of parking protected. For the like, provides that additional safety for cyclists. One person indicated this was the best thing for cyclists. The bike lane would be well protected from moving vehicles, the cars. Cars can park with less worry about crossing the cyclist path. Now that is, of course, that the driver entering the parked from the travel lane is entering the parked lane. But then there, you know, as you'll see on the dislike side, comments here about the people having to move from the parked vehicle to the curb across the vehicles. I do not like parking away from the curb, have to watch out for vehicles and cyclists. Impossible for handicap accessible parking without a conflict. We'll note that I don't believe there's any handicapped parking on Broadway at this current time. So this is one of those questions that the accessibility of the parking wouldn't be a change. Will hurt Broadway's businesses and traffic. Don't like it much. Broadway is fine as it is. I am jumping around here, I apologize, but you have this in front of you to read through. 3 lanes of traffic, confusing Back on the other side, people indicated that everything they liked about it and nothing they liked about it. I like it just as much as the buffered bike lane, but I think it makes it more dangerous for people exiting parked cars. They're not used to it and will likely be more hazardous to the cyclist. This is the only plan that could work. People of Sonoma do not follow traffic rules, so this is the safest.
That's my favorite one.
So, so now we'll move forward, please. So another one of the options that we put out there based on our input from City Council at the engagement meeting we had in March, we did put another option out there to determine whether or not there was interest in angled parking. Now this obviously has implications with regard to Caltrans and understanding how this could work, but we'll see here that actually nearly 50% of the respondents indicated that they were not in favor of more parking on Broadway. 21% had no opinion, and 30% indicated that they were in favor of more parking. Results were largely all over the place, depending on the different groups by location. If you resided on Broadway or worked on Broadway, those were a little flipped there, but then as it went into live in Sonoma or live work in the Valley, those were exactly the same. Even the visitors, somebody who visits the city, had less of an interest in the parking on Broadway. The under 50 and over 50 results largely the same, representative of the total graph there. So we'll go to the next slide, please. So with all those options put out there, one of our last questions was ranking the three options. And so what respondents were able to do is take the three options and put them in a relative order of their ranking. What we did here with this question is we took all of the number ones and ranked them against the other number ones. And what you would find is that both the standard bike lane and the parking protected bike lane were either number one or number three, and the buffered bike lane largely sat there in the middle. I don't have that depicted here on the screen, but that's from observing the data. What we have is largely what that pie chart actually shows is that majority of the respondents either selected the standard bike lane because they were in favor of just a standard bike lane, or largely because it did not change the roadway configuration from 5 lanes to 3 lanes. We saw that kind of throughout the data. The data here, the buffered bike lane and the parking bike lane are really kind of that vote or ranking for changing the roadway reconfiguration, while the standard bike lane was a vote to keep the 5-lane configuration. Taking that across by location, by transport, and by age of the respondents. On this chart here, I actually provided the numbers for you rather than just the percentages. You can see the under 50 and over 50, largely the same response there with just a little variation. You can see, because those groups are so disparate in their numbers, you can see that the under 50 was a smaller group because of where the average age range was, but you can see that 67% or 67 respondents liked the parking protected, while only half of those 33 liked the buffered, but then almost twice as many liked the standard bike lane. This was largely what we saw, that disparity of the 60 to 25 and then the 15 throughout the responses that we saw here. So You can see the drive only being a very, by transport, you can see the drive only being a very high percentage. Oh, we can go to the next. Thank you. This last question was basically an opportunity for the respondents to provide comments or consideration to you, the council. A couple items here. These are really just more, they're very verbose in their, but just to highlight a couple, angled parking and bike lanes don't work well together, which is why we actually did not propose the bike lanes with a class 2 bike lane. The bike way was proposed with the angled parking, which would put the bikes against the curb. Just to answer that question in particular. As a business owner, I see cars speeding down Broadway almost every afternoon. I see kids on bicycles. It's just off my screen. Sidewalk, and I think that these changes will help make Broadway feel like an extension of the plaza. You know, these are all in front of you to road through. I don't want to be too verbose, but we received again. I'd say that the 731 was a very acceptable and admirable response from the public with regard to this this project and the survey online. So I'll hand this back to Colleen.
You're muted, Colleen.
Thank you, Mayor Harvey. I know that was a lot of information to present, very dense, and it's all also in the report, the summary report and the more detailed report for anybody's reference now and in the future. But we're moving on. So those were all the survey results. And just to kind of recap, you've heard the history, the general plan circulation element, the recommendations in the planning documents. You've heard about the extensive outreach and the public input from the online survey. And you also know that Caltrans is going to start construction this fall on a pavement rehab project that's expected to be completed with paving in spring 2021. And we know after they pave, they're going to put marks down on the pavement. So this is an opportunity for council to choose to request that Caltrans restripe Broadway in a different configuration after the pavement rehab project is done. And just before they put the stripes down, city staff, from our conversations with Anna and his conversations, well, and with Betsy actually, we've received, I would say, informal communication that Caltrans supports multimodal transportation options and would be willing to consider a city council request for implementation of a revised striping plan for Broadway. But we all know, since Broadway is part of the state highway system, Caltrans has the final decision regarding restriping as part of their project.
Okay. Do we have questions from council? I'll try to get the participants up so you can raise your hand in there if you want to do that, or if you just want to raise your hand visibly on the screen, that's fine. No questions?
Yeah, and I was just going to kind of recap the options that are being considered, but we can move on to questions if the council's ready for that. I mean, I think you know about the options, and basically, I think
everybody's pretty familiar.
Yeah. So
do we have questions from council?
And we can go to the last slide, Rebecca. So just a couple comments, if the council can be patient for that. Just the staff and everybody working on this appreciates that Broadway serves as a main street and view corridor, as we've discussed. And we know it's an important discussion. I just want to say I'm grateful to everybody who took their time to complete the online survey. I'm also grateful to the staff at GHD that kept that survey going for an entire month, especially Katrina McCullough and Bavika Laxman. Want to thank them, and the staff recommendation is really that City Council discuss and give direction to staff regarding submittal of a request to Caltrans for consideration in their 2021 paving and restriping project. And just a reminder, we do have Betsy and Muthana here from Caltrans, along with Frank and myself.
Great. Questions from council?
Oh, this is Madeline. I only have, I guess, a couple of questions. One, currently, when you're on Broadway north-south, the curb next to the street next to the sidewalk is very rough. That's not how it's going to be again, is it? It wasn't paved to the curb.
So,
I would imagine who wants to ride on that?
no, that's a valid question. And my understanding, Muthana, I know you're listening and you can correct this if this is not correct.
There may be some reason for drainage, slope, I don't know.
Well, my understanding is that this paving project is going to pave the roadway from Lippa Gutter to Lippa Gutter. There won't be a section of the roadway that is not repaved.
That is correct.
Yeah.
That is correct.
Thank you.
I have a question. With regard to the angle parking, did we do any outreach or receive any feedback from the business community?
Well, the business community, they all received flyers. They all were certainly notified of the opportunity to comment on the survey. And we did have some of those vertical bars were people that own and work on Broadway. And we didn't
I'm talking about more specifically like the businesses in the area that the parking would actually occur. Like on Broadway, those businesses that would be adjacent to the parking. Like did the chamber do any specific reach out or anything?
Not that I know of, no. Good question.
Yeah, I have a question. Are these the only options that are possible? I've been kind of thinking about this, and I'm wondering if it would be possible to do, because the bike lanes as they exist right now, they aren't paved and they need to be repaved. And they need, sorry, my wife's just coming right now. And so basically from Patton to Napa, the bike lane doesn't exist. And then further up Broadway, it exists right now. It's just very rough. And so what I'm wondering is there a possibility of reducing by one lane from Napa to Broadway? And I would personally choose the southbound lane, and then adding a bike lane in there and then expanding that road. Like, are there other options? How much can we play with this? How much freedom do we have as far as giving direction? I guess is really my question.
That's a very interesting question. And I'm wondering what our consulting traffic engineer thinks of that. I know Caltrans has some criteria that they would find acceptable and not acceptable. And as I understand the question, are you thinking having bike lanes on a portion of the reach that we're talking about from Napa to MacArthur, but not the whole length?
Yeah, so basically from Broadway to Patton, there's a very popular crosswalk at Pete's that we could reduce, we could make shorter by a lane. And then also you could add bike lanes where they don't exist. And you would basically make, my idea would be to reduce the road going south away from the plaza to one lane, keep the turn lane and straight lane as planned, and then use that additional space to add just a normal standard bike lane that connects in. And then as the southbound lane goes up, it would split back into two lanes, basically after Pete's.
That's a great question. I see Frank thinking hard, and I don't know if he has a response to that question or not. And just to be clear, Harvey, a couple times you said from Broadway to Patton. Do you mean from Napa to Patton?
So Napa to Patton on Broadway, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So I guess I could step in here. So as we were indicating with the standard bike lane option, and I'm assuming, are you, when you say bike lane, are you indicating a buffered bike lane in some locations, or just a standard
Buffered or standard, I don't know what we could fit. I don't think that we could do, because we wouldn't be removing 2 lanes. I guess it would be kind of the same there as, I guess, because we were going to keep the left and right, but that becomes the middle turn lane. But if we could fit buffered, that would be great. The bike lanes are pretty wide as you get further south on Broadway. I mean, they're really wide now and pretty comfortable. But they need to be paved. But yeah, if we can fit buffered by removing 1 lane, great. If we can't, then just a regular standard without the additional buffering. But I guess I don't know enough about bike lane terminology to nail the differences. But I'm just thinking if we could add a visible bike lane, a named and segregated bike lane from Napa south on the up to Patton Street by removing one of the southbound lanes, and then not squeeze down, but push back out the 2 lanes as you go down. I think it would make a lot of sense. And then you'd have a bike lane the whole length of Broadway. And you would be able to make the crosswalk at Patton Street where Pete's is a little shorter. And frankly, the crosswalk right at Broadway and West Napa could be a little shorter too.
I think there's a configuration there because of one travel lane is 12 feet. And so at 12-foot travel lane, removing a 12-foot travel lane would in essence give you 2 6-foot bike lanes just by math. So you wouldn't need to reduce the travel lanes in order to add the bike lane, reduce the width if you just removed 1 lane. As it got to the crosswalks, my only reservation or concern would be the alignment, center line alignment of the lanes, because obviously you would want to take 1 lane in one direction and break that into space on both sides of the street. So it would likely have some jogging going on there. And as you approach the traffic signal at MacArthur,
but it wouldn't affect the traffic signal at MacArthur. All of that would be exactly the same.
Same thing.
And
just like we were proposing.
Yeah, I'm just saying as it come up, if you're going southbound, it would hit Patton and then it would expand into 2 lanes. And then it would look exactly as it exists now after Patton Street. But from Patton in on the southbound lane, it will be 1 lane and you'd have 2 bike lanes that connect into that larger bike lane that's there. Yeah, in that essence, you're not changing much on Broadway. You're really not changing anything except for the experience of going from West Napa to Patton, which is a very short amount of time. And that would help. We've had some conversation that it would help the intersection there because sometimes people are trying to turn right into the southbound 2 lanes and turn left, and it creates a little bit of confusion there. There would only be 1 lane, which would be somewhat helpful. And in addition, you would add bike paths where they aren't. The really spot where they don't exist is from Napa to Patton or so. And then now that they'd be paved, the bike lanes or the shoulder as it is now is wide enough to really be very comfortable. You can ride 2 wide there for sure. It's just horrifically unsmooth. It's basically a gravel road at the moment, as Madeline pointed out, but that would become smooth. And I think it could work out kind of for everybody. You'd mostly maintain the way it regularly works. You'd add some buffered right next to the plaza. You'd squeeze down the 2 most popular intersections to make them a little shorter for pedestrians.
I wonder if Betsy or Muthana has any comments from a Caltrans perspective.
So this is Betsy. So our main thing would be to run it through our highway operations and see how that affects, reducing the lanes. So right now we have 2 lanes in both direction, and when we have a lane reduction, we have to see how the highway will operate, since this being a state route, how the operations will work out. So a reduction in lane, as it has been discussed in Colin's presentation. It is not at the capacity, which is good, but we still need to run it through our highway operation. So we can definitely take a look at it and see how that would work. So it needs to be blessed by our highway operations department, as well as our pedestrian and bike group to see if there is a benefit. We do acknowledge this is the downtown area, which there is a lot of movement for a pedestrian, bicyclist, and give that downtown experience to the community as well as the visitors. So we do understand that. That's kind of our take on it. We can, of course, take back your comment, can take a look at it and see if it's possible. And yeah. I do appreciate your comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea if council agrees or any of the rest of it. And, we would love to hear feedback on it when we get into the comment period. But it seems like, we're reducing lanes in a significantly lesser way this way than if we're doing it along the whole breadth of Broadway. And Highway 12 is mostly 2-lane for its entire extent. So I don't, and we've done study already to prove that we're not at traffic capacity, as you mentioned. So to me, it seems good. And then is that something that if it were something council supported, and I have no idea, would that be something we could draw up easily and send on to Caltrans? Colleen, Frank?
Yeah, that's a question for Frank. I think he's drawing it up right now.
Okay, great. Do we have other council questions? I apologize for taking so much time.
Colleen and Mayor Harvey. I took a quick Google Map shot, and we have that as a just one-page PowerPoint. When we're talking about scenarios and streets, if we want to pull that up, and then the folks, Rebecca might be able to use the mouse to help describe, because sometimes
I could share my screen too and show it.
Yeah, it can be less clear. I think it just may be helpful to show the map so that either now or that there's real clarity about what you're suggesting.
So here's the street. So it's going a little slow. So what I'm saying is we'd take out one of these lanes, this lane here or whichever one, and potentially we'd take out this centerpiece. I don't know what would be necessary. And then you'd run, and you would do that from here, from the plaza right here. You take out one of these lanes all the way up through Patton. You could just do it to McDonald too. But if you did it through Patton, these are two pretty popular intersections. And then you would leave this 2-lane the whole length of Broadway. The northbound lane towards the plaza would stay 1-lane or 2-lane the whole way through. The turn lanes stayed normal. But here, the street does kind of widen, and you can see the bike lane. There's a pretty sizable, especially right here, you can see that there's a pretty sizable break between the car and the shoulder line. And so this is pretty comfortable to ride in. But up here, it's significantly less. It's tough to tell because of the trees, but it squeezes pretty hard right next to the cars there, and it can be pretty uncomfortable to ride in. And here we could have a bike lane right there and right here. We'd get rid of one of these lanes. It'd be a single lane on this side, on the southbound side. And then right after basically Pete's, hell, you can even add some angle parking in Pete's. That'd be cool. Then it would expand back into 2 lanes at this point. Right in here after Patton, this would go from 1 lane to back into 2 lanes. It's kind of my idea.
And this differs from what has been proposed when just where the lanes go back to 2 lanes.
No, this differs from what's been proposed because the other one, the proposal right now is to get rid of this lane and this lane, to get rid of 2 of the lanes here, to have a center turn lane and 2 lanes there for the entire length of Broadway. So to go from a 5 lane to a 3 lane, I'm saying.
Well, but you keep, no, I just, fine. I get, so where is yours similar and where is it different? Because it's really hard to keep track of what's happening.
It's similar in that it's basically similar from West Napa until Patton. And then it goes into the 5 lane afterwards. So it's similar until Patton Street. And then after that, it's the standard.
And why is that the point that it needs to go to more lanes?
Because 61% of the citizens said they didn't like it going to 3 lanes. And this is and because there's a significant bike lane or shoulder existing right now, as you can see with this car, for the majority of the stretch of Broadway. And I've ridden it. It's pretty significant. Other people maybe feel less comfortable with it, but so my thinking is we can develop a compromise position that puts a bike lane in where it isn't, which is down here, and leaves Broadway as it is for the majority of the road.
Any other questions before we, consultant team or Public Works?
Okay. All right. Should we open up for public comment? All right, I'll go ahead and open it up for public comment. We'll wait 3 minutes. Once we have existing public comments.
You do.
Go ahead and start reading those now then.
Matt Metzler. Dear City Council members, although I own a car, whenever possible, I bicycle for transportation because living close to the plaza, I find that it's usually faster than driving and finding parking. In addition to being good for one's health and the environment, providing safer cycling along Broadway will help reduce traffic and parking congestion by encouraging more to bicycle instead of drive. Right now, cycling on Broadway is scary because cyclists are forced to ride between speeding car traffic and parked cars. This is unsafe because the traffic forces cyclists to ride close to the parked cars where we run the risk of being doored when a rider hits a car door that a driver opens into the bike lane. This is a major cause of bicycle accidents and a deterrent to bicycling on the street. It is imperative that when the lanes are restriped on Broadway, there is a buffer between cyclists and both moving cars and parked cars. The safest option is the parking protected bikeway. This option retains 4 lanes for car traffic. It encourages cycling because riders will realize they have a safe and protected bike lane between the sidewalk and the parked cars and are not exposed to speeding traffic. This has the benefit of discouraging cyclists from riding on the sidewalk. It also does not require drivers to cross the bike lane to park and means that drivers will not open their doors into a bike lane. Cars are more dangerous, so they should be together near to the center of the road, and cyclists and pedestrians should be together near to the curb, since they are both traveling slower and not motorized. Next comment is from Greg Brennan. I look forward to restriping Broadway Highway 12 in a way that calms traffic on Sonoma's entry, reintroduces a small town feel to this town, and begins making biking in Sonoma a less life-threatening transportation solution for a community of less than 10,000 people. The more we can make this town walkable and bikeable, and the more we can encourage people to leave their cars in their garages, the better our town and our collective health will be. 1 lane for cars on each direction on Broadway is an important step to do that. 1 lane for bikes makes the sidewalk safer for people to walk, but there are challenges. Director Colleen Ferguson, City Traffic planner publicly expressed a design challenge about having bike lanes on Broadway and Napa Street and still having a right turn lane from Broadway onto East Napa Street. There is a relatively simple and cost-effective solution that also helps calm traffic through Sonoma's east side as it improves traffic, bicycle, and pedestrian safety benefits for our entire community. The solution is simple. Make the plaza one-way clockwise from First West to Spain Street to First Street East to Napa. Make East Napa Street one-way, westbound from 4th Street East into the plaza. Make East Spain Street one-way, eastbound from the plaza to 4th Street East. The solution's benefits. It eliminates the need for a right turn lane from Broadway onto East Napa. It's safer for pedestrians, especially tourists, crossing the streets in the plaza because traffic proceeds exclusively in one direction. It likely reduces eastbound traffic on East Napa Street because traffic heading from or through the plaza to Garrick, Lovell Valley, Thornsberry, Wood Valley, etc. moves on East Spain to 4th Street East and onto Lovell Valley to make the trek. It forces commercial vehicle traffic that often illegally uses East Napa Street as a thoroughway to stay on the truck route through Sonoma. It provides expanded bicycle lanes on East Napa Street and East Spain Street, and in doing so helps make East Napa Street even more bicycle friendly, as the traffic planners hope to do with the new Class 3 bicycle lanes on East Napa Street. And there is one more. This is from Nick Dixon. Many thanks to the City Council for their support and, oh, sorry, wrong one. Okay. No, that isn't. I'm sorry, you guys. Many thanks to the City Council for their support and help on COVID-19. I respectively ask the City Council that proposed restriping of Broadway to 3 lanes to be canceled and have the council continue their focus on key COVID-19 items. Many people want to keep Broadway as 5 lanes as an elegant entrance to a wonderful city and have Caltrans spend the money instead on fixing city roads and potholes. Addressing each of the points made by Works Director Colleen Ferguson and others. Traffic flow. Projected studies from the Public Works say that reducing to 3 lanes will allow 11,000 vehicles per day, while on weekends, we have 10,000 cars per day. This seems like a small margin of error, especially when you consider that the majority of the 10,000 cars per day travel during daylight hours, so that the daytime flow will be significantly constricted. One has only to see the traffic back up on West Napa Street, the same 3-lane format as proposed, to know how bad traffic can get. Turning lanes. Reducing the flow to 3 lanes will make turning lanes more constricted, with more through traffic passing at speed in the single right side lane. I'm concerned there will be more accidents in this 3-lane format. Bicycle paths. New bicycle paths are touted as a big advantage of the proposal. Having driven several times per day up and down Broadway in the past 20 years, I see very few cyclists use Broadway. High school kids come from the neighborhoods to use east and west routes. Tourists are directed to use the side street on already marked cycle routes as they cycle to the hills and venues. It's suggested that the proposed bicycle paths will prevent kids riding on the sidewalk. Most parents know that kids ride on the sidewalk as it is a thrill. It has curb jumps and obstacles to negotiate. I'm not condoning this bad behavior, but providing bicycle paths on Broadway will not stop this. Parking. There is plenty. There currently is parking all the way up Broadway, including the shops near the plaza. The proposal seems to believe this will increase shopping parking at the square. Safe parking is already behind the barracks. At nighttime, there are less than 12 cars parked on the whole stretch of Broadway. Cost. The premise is that there is no cost to Sonoma as Caltrans is picking up the cost. There are always costs, and wouldn't we rather Caltrans spend that money towards fixing potholes in Sonoma? So to close, I would respectively ask the council to drop the proposal and move on to more critical COVID-19 items. Thank you. And that appears to be all the comments I have right now.
All right.
No, I'm sorry, there's 2 more. How much time do we have left?
The time is past.
Okay, we're done then.
Did they come in before the time was passed?
No. It's
No.
not 3 minutes for all the comments.
No, any of the comments that have come in should be read now, as long as they came in within the 3-minute timeline. And then it may take us longer to read them all. But that is my understanding of how we were doing this. So if you have a couple more, LaTanya, you should read those, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is in addition to the last one I just read, Nick Dixon. Why is the mayor acting like a traffic engineering? This meeting is out of control. Does he have any background in this proposal? Just delete this item and focus on COVID-19. The second is from Kelso Barnett. Dear Mayor Harvey and City Council, the people have spoken. I would strongly encourage the council to support the people's request to keep Broadway as is, with 2 lanes of traffic going in either direction. With over 700 responses, this was a very statistically significant sample, and 61% is a landslide. As Public Works Director Ferguson noted, this is a large response from our small town. That means people feel very strongly about this issue. This is a solution in search of a problem. This matches up with what I've heard anecdotally, whether in conversations with friends, overheard at grocery stores, or posted via Facebook comment. The proposal to eliminate traffic lanes on Broadway appears to be wildly unpopular. When it comes to the general plan, I'd note that this was part of a circulation element update in 2015 and 16 conducted with significantly less public input before the Planning Commission and the City Council than today. Very few people were aware of this proposal. I'd also note that 8,000 cars a day is an average and doesn't reflect the peak. And as we've all learned recently during our shelter in place, it's all about the peak. We haven't seen a sophisticated traffic and circulation analysis of what will happen when northbound lanes are eliminated during peak hours and peak weekends. We saw what happened on 5th Street West, however, when lanes were eliminated in favor of bicycle lanes, and it wasn't pretty. Backups significantly increased and the bike lanes remain empty. I fear the result will be much worse on Broadway. I'd also discourage painting the bike lane in a bright neon green, as it has the potential to mar the aesthetics of the approach to our historic plaza. I want to compliment the City Council and City staff for executing an excellent public outreach process. Also, I'd like to say hello to Vice Mayor Hundley and compliment her on her Zoom background. Thank you, Kelso Barnett. And that's the last one.
Thank you, LaTanya. Appreciate it. All right, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Do we have comments from council? Vice Mayor Hundley.
Thank you, staff, and to our engineer and everyone that's been working on this. It was really nice to see so many people gave their opinions. I find the data is really interesting, but I do think that part of the process of reviewing it is, parsing out the people who have no interest whatsoever in riding a bicycle and the people who express that they might ride their bicycle more if the lanes were safer. And I thought that the fact about that this configuration was installed in 1956 to be not only interesting, but somewhat significant, because that was the era when the cars controlled everything and everybody was suddenly building for cars, and that's when cities became built for cars. But as long ago as our current general plan and also our circulation element, we keep saying things like we want to make Sonoma more bicycle friendly and pedestrian friendly, and feel like a small town even though we have a giant highway running through us. So I think that we have an opportunity to think about what, some things worked for 60 years, but what's going to work for, the next, probably not 60, but at least at least 10 or 20 years probably, as transportation starts to rapidly change. So the way I view this is looking at the future. We know that cars and individuals in individual cars is a thing of the past, and we are evolving towards other modes of transportation and getting people on the sidewalks and on the streets on their bicycles. And I don't know why anyone thinks that the Broadway leading up to the City Hall is pretty, because it is a concrete wasteland. It is a huge wide patch of asphalt, and like, I don't think that by changing it, we're taking away any aesthetic there, because I've always thought it was strange. We literally have an entire lane of asphalt just sitting in the middle of the road, is not even used. I mean, I parked there once when my car broke down, but it's not even used to turn. So I'm interested to hear what my colleagues have to say, but I think if our goal is to move things forward and help create a future Sonoma where people actually do ride their bikes more and do walk more, and the data shows that a significant number of people said that they would feel more comfortable with bike lanes and protected bike lanes, and that they would ride their bicycle more. So the two styles that I support are the buffered and the protected. The protected being my first choice. I think it's going to take some creativity in figuring out how to keep the cars out of it, but I've seen it in other cities, and you can have different aesthetically pleasing things that you can put to physically separate the bike lane from the parking area so that people don't park in your bike lane. But and as far as what the rest of Broadway looks like, I'd rather put it in the wheelhouse of the traffic engineers to decide for sure. But when they were talking about this the last time, I mean, the entire stretch of Broadway from Leveroni to Napa Street, it's chaotic, and there's a lot of like partial lanes and a lot of merging, and anyone that's been on there probably know that the traffic is starting to drive a lot faster. Like, it used to be people would only drive fast on like the south part, but now it's, you even get to Pete's and people are still going 35 miles an hour. And maybe that's the most efficient way to do it. But the fact is that this is a downtown area, and I don't think it would be a bad thing if it started feeling like a little more like downtown. And then the last thing I'll say is with reducing the lanes, probably the most frequent concern I hear about Broadway and the Plaza is concerns about the crosswalks, and particularly the crosswalks in front of Pete's and the crosswalks south of that. And I like the idea of taking out 2 lanes of cars so that the pedestrians have less to worry about, and also they don't have to deal with this situation where you have one car stopping for a crosswalk and the other one, you can't see them coming and they just drive right through it. So I think if we're going to say that bicycles and pedestrians, and especially pedestrians, are a priority, then this is a huge step that we can move forward for us. And as far as what Logan's talking about with like the south part, we are, according to our current general plan, and enlivening 4 corners and building Altamira, like we are putting more people further down the street. So I don't think it's too short-sighted to really think of this thing all holistically. But as far as any of the south half would go, I'd be interested in hearing more about the data studied with the high school and whether that would or would not be affected. But as far as where there's so many merge lanes, I just noticed that people just are driving very fast today, and I wouldn't feel bad about doing something that would slow them down, because I find pedestrians and bicycles are going to be more important going forward.
Anyone else who'd like to make a comment? Go ahead, Amy.
Okay. Well, I think the lot of data, probably one of our most the most input we've ever received on any item, actually. So I guess I tend to feel like the will of the people who live here is probably the most important thing. I think Logan, we're in, hot competition here, but heretofore I have been the #1 cyclist on this council. I've spent many, many hours on my bicycle. And I think that going north-south, actually using First Street East or First Street West as a transportation where you want to get is a much safer and also more physically attractive route to ride your bike. And I don't know that adding bike lanes on Broadway is necessary to achieve the same transportation goals. I would say like different east to west, because the bike path is beyond the plaza. That would be a great spot for a bike path. I think that's very dangerous to go on. Napa Street or Spain Street are very dangerous and need a bike path, but I don't think that the same issues exist north to south because of First Street East and First Street West being so much calmer and safer and more visually attractive. So I support keeping it the same.
Madeline, David? You're muted, Madeline.
What was that?
Go ahead, David.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I actually, I agree with Councilmember Harrington. The problem that we have is Highway 12 going through the city of Sonoma has always been an issue until you change it going to Arnold, but it's going to be a state highway, and keeping the bicycles away from the traffic and making sure the traffic flows there at this point, I think outweighs anything that I have seen by any of the engineers at this point. So I am concerned about the crosswalks, and I wish that we could talk a little bit more about bump outs and things that we could do to make pedestrian safety there. But as far as, the state highway going through the city of Sonoma, we cannot change that at this point. So when you get big trucks going through and you're not having enough lanes, it's just going to be an issue, and traffic will be what happened on 5th Street East. One of the council members mentioned that. I remember watching the council back then when that discussion was made. They took parking away from residents and they put the bicycle lanes in there. Wasn't really utilized the way they thought. And I've always said keeping the bicycles in a safer area throughout Sonoma would be what I would want to see.
Hey, Madeline?
Yeah. Oh, I lost everybody. Sorry. Can you hear me? No.
Yes.
Oh, you can? Oh, great. Okay. So I just wanted to, I've lost everything here. So I just wanted to say it was kind of, Amy, I don't want you to gag when I say this, but the standard reminds me of the leaf blowers. It's very equal on how people felt with respect to leaf blowers, and standard, it was 42 and 40%. No and yes, I don't know. Yeah. No was 42% and yes, 40 to leave it the same or whatever. With respect to buffered lane for bikes, I prefer the buffered lane. I don't know if you said this already, Logan, at the curb, because I think to put the bikes out at the traffic, it's an unfair advantage with a $3,000 or $5,000 vehicle with a bicyclist, close to the traffic. And I guess I don't know first, and I think someone made a mention about 5th Street West, which I think was the biggest mistake that was ever made here. And I don't even know, I don't have a history for it, but I don't think it works the way it was supposed to. And the other thing I think I heard Amy say about 1st Street East or 2nd Street East, because I think the 2nd runs from East MacArthur, then it jigs around. So, the people there on, I think it's on 2nd Street East, are worried about bicyclists because when they come through, because that's like what they refer to as the shortcuts from the moms of Presswood School and big construction trucks. That's easier to do that than go on Broadway. So those are my only comments. I'm really concerned about the bicyclists' safety. And Logan, I saw your smile when they were talking about jumping off, like jumping off curbs and riding on the sidewalk. But to remind everybody, there was a very bad accident with a young boy who hit a woman who is, I don't even know what her status is, but was comatose for many, many years. I don't even know if that poor lady is alive. But so I've never seen kids really ride on the sidewalk. But those are my comments. Thank you.
Do you have one of the three that you support?
Well, I'm actually pushing towards standard, but I think if we're going to talk about buffered, I would prefer that bicyclists be on the curb. There's three. There is standard, buffered, and parking protected bikeway. So, you know, buffered seems good to me. I worry about closing down lanes, but I think your suggestion might make some sense to me. But, you know, I think there's further time for us to actually look at that. But thanks. Thank you.
Okay. So, I mean, there is a problem, I think, on Broadway with cyclists riding on the sidewalk. When Colleen and I were out there doing, during the farmer's market, walking people along Broadway, we saw a group of 5 or 6 kids riding along the sidewalk on Broadway. And it is very dangerous. And we have a lot of people who like to walk along that sidewalk. And so providing some amount of safety for them in the roadway is important. I think it could also be helped with a bit of enforcement there to try to move the bikes off. There's a variety of ways that we could solve that problem. I also agree with Councilmember Harrington that the public's voice is important. And however I may design the city, I have, you know, definitely strong opinions of increasing more bike accessibility. I support that. I think that sounds wonderful. But 61% of the citizens that were surveyed said that they don't want it. And that's important for me to consider as a council member, I think. I do think that there's a lot of people, everybody who I've talked to about this, that isn't already a fairly avid cyclist, really doesn't want any change. And I had, you know, when we had the Blattner event, I had a whole bunch of people come up to me and tell me that this was not a good idea. I've talked to business owners around the plaza. They are not interested in seeing this go to 3 lanes. I also think that change is extremely difficult and something that people are generally fearful of. And I also think that along Broadway, once you basically get past Patton Street, the roadway is pretty wide and there's a significant shoulder there that would allow somebody to cycle and keep things 5 lanes. I think the width of the plaza or of Broadway does not look like a concrete wasteland. I think it looks quite nice. I like the kind of grandeur of it. I do think that that is a nice thing. And that's one of the reasons I don't like moving the cars in. I also think that I've talked to people who live in areas where there are cars, they're parking protected bike lanes and the cars consistently park right into the bike lane, blocking it off. And so it makes it not an enjoyable experience. I support my proposal of reducing a lane from West Napa to Patton and putting in a buffered bike lane along that stretch of road and then going back into standard along the way. I think it's a compromise position. 40% of people said that they would like a change. And I don't really look this as 3 different sects. I look at it as you either want to reduce the lanes on Broadway or you don't. And so I think it's more 60-40 than it is, you know, 35-23, whatever. So that's the way I kind of see it. It sounds like we have 3 votes for standard right now, and 1 vote for change it to, I think you said, I'm not sure if you said buffered or protected, Rachel, but I do think that.
I supported either buffer or protected.
Okay. I would propose my compromise position to try to have direct staff to move lanes to reduce a lane from West Napa to Patton, to add buffered bike lanes along that stretch, and then have that connect to the existing standard bike lanes along Broadway. That would be my proposal.
So doing buffered or protected bike lanes at the City Hall intersection would remove lanes.
It would remove one lane up to Patton Street. Yes.
Are we
And then
taking
we go back to 5 lane
on this on a motion, or what are we doing?
Yeah.
I could move that direction. I don't know if there's.
No, but are you seeking general direction, or are we taking a vote? You're on mute, Kathy.
Yeah, so sorry. Yes, no, we are looking for a vote. We were fortunate to be able to have a couple of extra weeks here. We were supposed to bring this to you on April 6th. It's the 20th. So we got a little extra time from Caltrans, but we do need to know the direction. Now, in terms of Mayor Harvey's idea, if council was interested in that, I think you'd want to say, explore that. If it doesn't work, here is our backup alternative, because there's not time to come back, as I understand it, to come back to the council again. So you need, if there are two options, or a preferred and a backup, you can do that, or you're sending one option as your preference to Caltrans for them to decide.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Sure.
Is it permissible under the Brown Act to suggest a third different possibility that was not agendized? Is that okay because the broad topic is how should we do it, or?
I think it was written, the way this was put together was a variety of restriping. You know, we could always take a 5-minute break, caucus quickly with our legal counsel if we needed to do that. Jeff is available if we needed to do that. I can look, let me look at kind of the actual agenda, because it was not agendized as one of 3 options.
Okay.
It was agendized as discussion, consideration, Broadway, other results, and possible direction for a paving and restriping project. So the overall agenda, I think, was written wide enough. It didn't say, just say 3 options. So I believe we are fine in terms of the Brown Act. But we could always take a 5-minute break, do a quick caucus with legal counsel if necessary.
It's fine with me. Not the 5-minute break, but just the review.
So you would like it reviewed with legal counsel?
No, I don't. I don't.
Okay. Okay. Good. I mean, other reasons I support the proposal that I'm suggesting is that their 2 main pedestrian crossings are really, in my mind, at Broadway and West Napa, or Broadway and Napa, and at Patton Street. Those are kind of the 2 main places that people are crossing. Right across from Pete's, and then the other intersection at Broadway. And we would be able to reduce that travel time significantly by reducing 1 lane for that direction. And it would also slow down a certain amount of traffic there. I agree that speeds on Broadway are extremely high. But the public doesn't support, and doesn't sound like we have broad council support to reduce 2 lanes for the entire length. So
I support whatever buffered or protected bike lanes I can get, and if that's only part of it, then I would support that plan too. Yeah, and I just wanted to note that we've discussed a lot about pedestrians and bicycles and in the old chamber, and there's been a lot of support for it, and this is an opportunity to make a really big step towards actually making Sonoma more bike and pedestrian friendly.
Madeline, you're muted.
Yeah.
Okay, so I agree. I agree. I like the idea that you're heading south. That's away from City Hall, which I think is really something that captures the imagination of people, similar to possibly even the Alamo. So I really like, that. If you can go away from that, that's better for me, because I don't like limiting anything going towards City Hall. That's it.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, the thing that I do like, I mean, for the whole stretch of Broadway, I like if we were going to do the whole stretch, I'd support the buffered because it keeps it just as wide and it doesn't bring the cars in again. And people, I've had a lot of people come up to me and say, I like the grandeur. I like how wide it is. I like the kind of broad promenade up Broadway. And I think that aesthetic is important. David, do you want to weigh in? You just muted yourself, David.
Oh, no, I've already weighed in the way I feel. Your proposal, I mean, I respect it, and there's great thinking outside the box, but I would not support that.
Okay. Well, okay, I'm going to move on my proposal to direct staff to move from to reduce a lane on the southbound lane of Broadway and build a buffered bike lane from West Napa up to Patton Street to connect to existing standard bike lane. Is there a second? Okay. No second.
No second. Okay.
All right.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Sorry, who was that for the second?
It was me. And so I imagine that this is like an idea that's going to be forwarded to Caltrans, and then they're going to look at it and do all of their modeling and check it out.
And I would comment that we would work with our consulting traffic engineer to lay out something that makes sense from a traffic engineer's perspective, and then forward that request to Caltrans.
I mean, Frank, just initially hearing it, what are your thoughts on it from a traffic engineering perspective?
I made the comment earlier. I think the only issue I foresee is the transition. And there are 2 crosswalks that Caltrans is looking at their improvements at, and that's both Patton and France. So this really, this change would only incorporate through the Patton crosswalk, but it would likely need to transition back after the crosswalk, so we don't have vehicles looking to jump into that lane immediately after the crosswalk. So there'll be some distance there, but I think it's the transition that really kind of concerns me the most, but we can work it out.
I'd be happy to change the motion to go up to France Street, because that's another crosswalk that's significantly impacted and busy. And that would, I think you're right that if we have, cars trying to do a different thing where they're trying to get around the car that's going slow in front of them to speed up along Broadway, I think that might be amenable. I'd be happy to change the motion there.
That's fine.
Mayor Harvey, I don't know whether Caltrans, I mean, you can take a vote too. You've heard the traffic engineering. We do have Caltrans here just to, I mean, they probably need to look at the engineering, but just if there's anything off the top that says no, does that make sense to hear from them? Or if they're not raising a flag, maybe that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's from a traffic flow perspective, we're keeping 2 lanes going northbound the entire way. So the traffic flow going northbound is exactly the same as it exists today, right now. The only change is southbound is going to be 1 lane from the plaza to after France now, and then it'll go back to 2 lanes, and all the way back to MacArthur, it's going to be exactly the same as it currently is. So from MacArthur to France, it's exactly the same as it currently exists as standard. And you still have good bike lanes there, and it's going to be paved out and great. And then, to me, it seems to make some sense. But I'm not a traffic engineer, of course, as it was noted by the public commentary. Go
Since
ahead.
Caltrans isn't piping up, I'm assuming that that's not a major red flag at this point. Sounds like it would need to be looked at.
Can I have a couple words? This is Muthana.
Go ahead. Yes, please.
I think the crossing from where Pete's Coffee is now, we are proposing the hawk signal. So pedestrian crossing is going to be significantly safer than whatever it is now. We did try to accommodate installing those hawk signals in other locations as it was highlighted and communicated to us. In general, we would like the highway or the road to be consistent, not too many changes in it, just from driver education point of view. And we will support whatever you recommend. We will take it and consider it. But it starts by drawing those plans so we can understand them and evaluate them. The other portion that I would like to highlight is the timing of when the request comes. We are at the tail end of our design phase. And in June, we will be asking the California Transportation Commission for funding for this project. We need to know about this part before we go to the funding. So if the schedule works, that will be fine.
Frank, do we think we can get this turned around and sent it to Caltrans in time?
Yeah, we've got some conceptuals that pretty much are a mix of this. The three options can be modified fairly easily, so that Caltrans can be given a concept that works. And to your point just a second ago about extending this to France, the one thing I would note is you were clear about, Mayor Harvey, about the existing lane widths that are out there now, the super wide parking lane. That parking lane does extend to the France Maple Street intersection. So in your terms of extending that alternative down to France is consistent with where the roadway actually widens to the 86 feet. So that transition wouldn't be as awkward at that location, just as a point of clarification.
And I'd like to be able to, I mean, frankly, I'd like to be able to make a motion that allows Frank to kind of, you know, if there's some play there, that allows him to kind of make, but I don't want to be too unspecific where it's going to be, okay, now we're going to do the whole thing, you know, if we're making them that motion. So, okay, great. So it seems to make sense to you, Frank. It seems like we can get it to Caltrans in time. So, and then Kathy, you wanted us to have a secondary option.
Well, let's
take a call first on this one.
Yeah, let's do a vote. Let's do a vote on this first option for clarity first, and I think it would be helpful to have you restate it, okay, since it's, and then have Rachel re-second, just so that we're clear.
Okay, so I move that we provide direction to.
Mayor Harvey.
Sorry, go ahead.
Quick comment. Sorry about that. I thought that I heard someone say buffered bike lane with this removing one lane. I think one lane gives you standard bike lane, not buffered. And Frank, you could comment on this as well. It's very tight, I know, as we approach Napa Street on Broadway. And if we're taking out one travel lane, I don't see that as buffered bike lanes on both sides. And so I just want to make sure people are clear before they're voting on the motion. So sorry about the interruption.
So this is not buffered bike lanes.
So where it would transition back to the 5 lanes, the lanes would actually need to be reduced to the minimum of 11 feet, and a standard 5-foot bike lane would continue from the point at which the lane was removed. North of where the lane were removed, it's possible that that would be a 6 plus some small buffer. But it's actually the point at which we keep the 5 lanes and try and add a bike lane. That hasn't changed. That would be a 5-foot bike lane alone without a buffer.
So the question is from West Napa to France, would we have if we removed one southbound lane, would we be able to have a buffered bike lane along that section? How big would the buffer be?
Just want to clarify.
That's the question.
It would be a small buffer. I would say somewhere between 2 to 3 feet potentially. Not the same buffer that we had called out earlier in our designs, which was a buffer between the travel lane and the bike lane, and a buffer between the parking lane and the parking lane. This would be likely a very small buffer between the travel lane and the bike lane only.
So that's all I want to clarify, that it's a different kind of buffered bike lane. It would still have somewhat of a buffer.
So would the buffer on the car door side, same or different?
So buffered is that is in most circles.
Like I'm saying, would it be even on each side? Because before it was like you could open your car door and you wouldn't knock over a bicycle. So is that changing because of this alteration?
The buffer would be between the travel lane and the bike lane, not the bike lane and the parking lane. So there would be no buffer for the car zone, the door zone. Unless that were the preference to go that way. Oh, somebody's bringing up cross section.
What about this area here? This yellow area? Is there a way to make that smaller to allow space for a buffer up through here?
So that serves, while it is striped as a no travel or no turn lane, it serves two purposes. One, it creates a refuge area even though it goes to a point. In our concepts, we would have created a refuge at the intersection of Napa,
right here,
Broadway there, exactly. And the two alleys that come off of Broadway between here and Pete's, this lane in the middle is often used by either trucks parking for delivery or as a two-way left turn lane for those as alleys.
Okay.
But we have seen tractor trailers parked in that median.
That's true. I've seen that. Okay. All right. So I'd like to make my motion if that's all right. All right. So I move that we direct staff to design plans and submit to Caltrans restriping of Broadway that eliminates one southbound lane from Napa Street to France and adds in bike lanes, standard protected, what the largest we can fit, along that section, after which the road reverts to its existing position. Does that work? Okay.
Even though I find this to be an extremely watered down version of something that could be very helpful, I will take the bike lanes that I can get and I will second the motion.
All right, roll call vote.
Did I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay, so if you're looking for some type of a buffered space for bicyclists, what is a good range? I heard something between 8 feet and 2.3. So what is safe for the bicyclist? What's the standard? Whomever.
So what we had done with the buffered in the past. So a standard bike lane, minimum standard bike lane is 5 feet wide. That is between parking and moving traffic, or curb and moving traffic.
Okay.
6 feet is what we were able to get with the amenity of the larger roadway, and we were able to add a buffer on both sides. Now, the point of the buffer between the parking and the bike lane was that it removed the bike from the apparent door zone. So if a door opened up, there would be 3 feet of a buffer there that would allow the door to open without it striking a cyclist. And then the other 3 feet was that buffer that provided the bike lane to be separated from the travel lane. So it was
So
really.
Is that what we're talking about here, Logan?
I guess Frank would probably have to answer that question. I think we're talking about a smaller buffer because we're only removing one lane of traffic versus two.
Yeah, it'll be slightly narrower than that. It'll be narrower.
And I guess I missed this. Is it on the curbs? Is it at the curb?
It's not a protected bike lane.
The bike lane that we're talking about, as I understand it, would be between the moving cars and the parked cars, and there would be a few feet buffer between the moving cars and the bike lane. There would be no buffer between the parked cars and the bike lane.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe,
Roll call.
roll call.
Rebecca, we can't, can you unmute?
Councilmember Agrimonti. Can you hear me?
Do it again, please.
Councilmember Agrimonti.
Aye.
Councilmember Cook.
No.
Vice Mayor
What did you say?
What?
Vice Mayor Hundley.
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington.
I appreciate the effort, but given that it hasn't been studied, isn't engineered, and wasn't discussed with the public, I'm going to vote no.
Yes. You're really breaking up, Rebecca. It's almost impossible to hear you.
I think my signal on my phone is going.
Oh.
So that passes, the motion passes 3-2. So I would recommend at this point you have an alternative, a second vote in case this engineering is not doable, so that there is the backup option as well.
I move to support protected bike lanes. Protected bike lanes along the entire length of Broadway.
What's that?
I move to support parking protected bike lanes along the entire length of Broadway.
Well, okay, I'll second that. Well, that's what I wanted the whole time.
Roll call.
Councilmember Agrimonti.
No.
Councilmember Cook.
No.
Vice Mayor Hundley.
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington.
No.
Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion failed 3-2.
All right. Do you want to do another backup?
Should we just keep throwing stuff out there? Because I'll say consistent with Logan's map, but buffered, actual true buffered. Which would mean
Can we do that?
I don't think there's.
I think there's room.
No. It'd be the lanes are not the same, but I'm just saying how far south your transition to back to more lanes. But it's just we're at the part that approaches City Hall. It would be what the engineers put together for a true buffered lane.
Sure.
And that is my motion.
Second.
Councilmember Agrimonti.
No.
Councilmember Cook.
No.
Vice Mayor Hundley.
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington.
No.
Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion fails 3-2.
I make a motion as a third backup that we leave it as is.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Councilmember Agrimonti.
Aye.
Councilmember Cook.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hundley.
No.
Councilmember Harrington.
Aye.
Mayor Harvey.
No.
Motion carries 3-2.
All right. Great. Thank you.
Thank you all.
We're done. Thank you. I do want to say thank you to staff. Thank you to Colleen. Thank you to Frank. Really fantastic outreach. It was incredible to see how many respondents we got. And really beautiful job. And I appreciated the presentation. The data was really deep. That was a deep dive into what the public had said. And I appreciate the breakdowns and all of it. And I appreciate all your work. And Caltrans, I appreciate you working with our city and the work that you've done, and look forward to hearing back on the proposal. And Frank, I look forward to seeing what you get drawn up based on what you've heard here today. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
And I'm happy that Matt Metzler weighed in. I wondered where he was. I thought he was sick or something.
He was in the presentation too.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay, thank you, council.
Thank you.
Is the meeting adjourned?
Thank you. No, no, we have a few other things.
All right, so council member reports and comments. I want to report that Sonoma Family Meal, which has been distributing a couple thousand meals in our valley every week, is almost out of money. The way that they work is that they take donor dollars, they use it to purchase food. Basically, they hire restaurants, they pay restaurants, including Girl in the Fig, Picasso's, and Palooza, to make meals, and then they distribute those meals throughout our community for free. So they're right now doing it in the Vets. They're doing a couple sites doing a site at La Luz and in Boise Hot Springs as well. And then Vintage House too, contracts with them. They're helping support our local businesses by giving them some amount of pass-through income. And they're helping support our food insecure members of our community with meals for free. If anybody out there has the ability, please donate to Sonoma Family Meals. They are very, very close to not being able to provide this in the next couple weeks. And they provide about half of their services in Sonoma Valley. And they're a countywide organization. So they really benefit us to the tune of they need money. So if you have the ability, please donate to them. Any other council member reports?
I've been doing my weekly calls with the Sonoma County Mayors and Council Members Legislative Committee, and every week we've been talking to a different state legislator that represents Sonoma County, and it's been a lot of time about the cities, all the cities in Sonoma County, talking about the issues that are evolving over this whole crisis, and it's been very helpful, and we have a lot of great state reps. And our next two calls are going to be our two federal reps. So we'll be talking to Jared Huffman this week and Mike Thompson next week. And that if anyone out there is still watching, you should call your federal senators and ask them to be advocating for money for local governments. And in fact, call every representative you can think of and tell them that local governments need money, because it's going to be a huge problem, and Sonoma's in the same boat as everybody else, but I could use the help. And is this the appropriate time to talk about the art task force? There'll be more exciting news to come about this, but there's been a coalition of with the community center and the Sonoma Valley Museum, and we are now recruiting some other art organizations, but we are getting ready to launch what is going to be a weekly inspired community projects, where there'll be sort of different activities that you could do with your family. The first one's going to be sort of an outward expression to your neighborhood by putting something in your yard that we'll tell you all about. So it's been fun planning it, and we hope the first one, when everyone's out on your daily walks, that you will start seeing some new art popping up on Fridays. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of information out about that, but it's been a very nice, positive thing going, and we're excited to share it with you. That's it.
Any other council member reports? All right, city manager, comments or announcements?
Great. I've just got a few graphics if the city clerk can put up just a 4-slide PowerPoint. So the first thing, just a reminder, next slide please, is just we now are in the new world with the face masking to cover up. So when you're entering a building using a face mask, in a grocery store, any kind of a shopping thing. If you're out walking, you don't have to have one, or bike riding, but if you want to carry one with you in case you run into a friend and stop and have a conversation, because you will need one then. So super important. And I think the face masks and covering is going to be part of what's going to help us get out of the shelter in place in a period of time. So I know it's not comfortable, but just encourage folks to get used to it. It's important. Next thing is just again, reminder, Sonoma Valley Together. These are the information about the food calendar, and the other need there is that some of the food groups are reporting is volunteers. You know, as this becomes a longer road for all of us. We had volunteers come out initially, but we really need some more volunteers to come out and help with food distribution. So it's a lot of fun. People are finding it incredibly fulfilling. So just if you've got some time on your hands, please go to SonomaValleyVolunteers.org and sign up to volunteer. Next slide. Their Redwood Empire Food Bank is going to be back in front of City Hall on Friday, April 24th from 11 to 4. This is their second drive-through donation time, and they did well last time. So some of the items they need are tuna and canned meat, peanut butter, canned soup and stews, rice and dry beans, cereals, canned fruits and vegetables, protein bars. So if you can pick some things up this week and then drop them by on Friday, do a quick drive-by, maintain your social distance, and support our community. And then the last item, two other quick items. So we are looking Tuesday night market with the governor's kind of declaration that we won't be doing mass events this summer. We are kind of suspending. Maybe we'll be able to reopen a little later, but at this point we are suspending our traditional, wonderful, fun-filled Tuesday night market. We are going to be coming out and just doing kind of a farmers only market so that we can bring more produce and help our local farmers. We're going to try this for a month or two. We're going to be doing it, it'll be a little earlier, like 3 to 6:30 in the parking lot behind the Little League field. And we'll see how this works to try to bring additional fresh produce to our community. But our traditional Fun Tuesday night will be put on hold until we can have some more mass gatherings. So, and then the last slide is Earth Action Week. This is this week. There's a lot of great things. We wanted to have a big a real Earth Action Week we had planned, but it all went virtual. So I want to thank our sustainability coordinator, Travis Wagner, and Sarah Tracy on our PIO team for putting this together. There's games, suggestions, tools. If your kids are home, there's definitely some youth-oriented activities. And so really encourage folks to think globally, act locally, and do some of this good Earth Action Week. One of the things also partnering with Sonoma Ecology Center, it's their 30th birthday, and they were started 30 years ago on Earth Day. And so they will be coming this, I think it is this Saturday. More information is on our website, but they're handing out victory gardens. I think they have 300 of them that you can stop and pick up and start growing your own produce. So those are just some of the items that are occurring.
I think they're
reminders this week.
I think they're victory garden starter kits.
Starter kits, sorry, thank you. So that is the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Appreciate that. I can't see my paper, but I think that's the end of the meeting. So appreciate it. Thank you so much. We don't have a great
Thank
rest
you.
of your evening. Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you, Rebecca and Kathy.